The Fiddler's Green dropped out of faster-than-light travel like a stone falling through glass. One moment there was nothing on the gentle passage's damaged sensors. The next moment there was a ship, angular and dark and covered in armor plating, sitting less than 2,000 meters away. The arrival shook the already broken Velhari vessel, hard enough to knock people off their feet. On the command deck of the gentle passage, Torev stared at his screen and felt his skin turn white again. The new ship was not from the Galactic Union. It did not match any known design in their database. It was smaller than the Krithari gunships in length, but it was thick, heavy, built with sharp edges and flat surfaces that made it look like someone had carved it out of a single block of iron. It was broadcasting on military frequencies, and its weapons systems were already powered up. "Captain," Torev said, his voice barely a whisper, "another ship has arrived. It is not one of ours. It is not one of theirs. I do not know what it is." Yelena came to the screen and looked. Her skin went from pale blue to dark violet, a color that meant confusion and deep unease. She had spent her entire career trading with dozens of species across the galaxy. She knew the ships of the Miragi, the Telvanni, the Orshan, the Krethari. She did not know this one. On the bridge of the Fiddler's Green, Captain Lucas Greer stood with his arms crossed and studied the tactical display. The picture was clean and simple. 3 hostile gunships, arranged in a loose triangle around one damaged freighter. The freighter was venting atmosphere from multiple breaches. Life signs were clustered in one section of the ship, probably the surviving crew gathered in one spot. The hostiles were in the process of boarding. Greer did not feel rushed. He felt focused. This was the part of the job he understood best. There was a problem. He was going to fix it. He looked at his communications officer. "Open a channel to the hostile ships, all frequencies." The channel opened with a soft click. Greer spoke in the same flat, unhurried voice he used for everything, whether he was ordering breakfast or calling in an airstrike. "Unidentified hostile vessels. This is Captain Lucas Greer of the United Earth Navy destroyer Fiddler's Green. You are engaged in an act of piracy against a vessel that has requested our assistance. You have 60 seconds to pull back and leave this area. If you do not, we will open fire. This is your only warning." He released the channel and waited. The bridge was quiet. Pete Langford, the weapons officer, a young man with blonde hair and nervous hands that became perfectly still whenever he touched the firing controls, watched his screen and waited for the order. The Krethari took 38 seconds to respond. When they did, the message came through the translator in a harsh, choppy voice. "You are unknown to us. You have no authority here. Leave now or be destroyed." Greer looked at Langford. He gave a single nod. No words were needed. The Fiddler's Green fired its forward kinetic batteries. The guns did not shoot energy beams or plasma bolts like most galactic weapons. They fired solid metal slugs the size of a man's fist at a speed that was difficult to understand. The slugs crossed the distance to the lead Krithari gunship in less than a second and hit its engine section with the force of a small earthquake. The gunship broke apart. There was no dramatic explosion, no slow crumbling. One moment it was a ship. The next moment it was a spreading cloud of metal and fire that expanded outward in silence. The vacuum of space swallowed the destruction without a sound. The other 2 Krithari gunships reacted immediately. They turned hard and ran, engines burning at full power, heading for the edge of the system as fast as they could move. They did not fire back. They did not send a message. They simply fled. Langford tracked them with his targeting system, his finger resting lightly on the firing control. He looked at Greer. "Let them go," Greer said. "They will tell their friends what happened here. That is more useful than killing them." Down in the shuttle bay, Sergeant Priya Vasquez was already suited up and ready. She had been ready for the last 30 minutes. Her combat armor was dark gray, sealed tight against vacuum, with a helmet that covered her entire head and a visor that glowed faint orange. She carried a short-barreled rifle built for close-quarters fighting and a sidearm strapped to her thigh. She moved with a quick, sharp energy, checking her team's gear as they loaded into the boarding shuttle. Danny Holt was behind her, his demolitions pack strapped to his back, grinning inside his helmet. Karen Odom was last, her medical kit slung across her chest, her face calm and focused behind her visor. Greer's voice came over the radio. "Vasquez, you are cleared aboard. The hostile ships are gone. The freighter crew is alive, but the ship is in bad shape. Go in careful. These are civilians, and they have never seen a human before." "Understood, Captain," Vasquez said. She slapped the shuttle door control, and the engines fired. The shuttle crossed the gap between the two ships in 4 minutes. It locked onto the Gentle Passage's emergency airlock with a heavy clang that rang through the damaged hull. The door opened. The Marines stepped aboard. The first Velhari to see them was a young female named Sira, who had been standing near the airlock corridor when the shuttle docked. She had been hoping to see Galactic Union peacekeepers, slender figures in white uniforms who would speak softly and guide them to safety. Instead, she saw 3 figures that filled the corridor from wall to wall. They were enormous by Velhari standards, each one standing nearly 2 heads taller than the tallest Velhari on the ship. They were encased in dark armor that made them look like machines. Their boots hit the deck with heavy, rhythmic thuds that vibrated through the floor. They carried weapons that Sira's eyes could not even make sense of, black angular things that looked as if they had been designed by someone who hated the idea of mercy. Sira screamed. She turned and ran back toward the cargo bay, her thin legs carrying her fast, her skin flashing bright white with terror. She burst through the cargo bay doors, screaming that monsters had boarded the ship. The cargo bay erupted in panic. Velhari scrambled backward, pressing against the far wall, holding their children close. Torev grabbed a piece of broken pipe and held it in front of him with shaking hands, the only weapon available to a species that had never built one. Then the Marines entered the cargo bay. They stopped just inside the door. Vasquez held up one hand, signaling her team to hold position. She could see the situation clearly. 40-some terrified aliens, small and fragile-looking, huddled together like prey animals, cornered by something they could not fight. No threats, no weapons except the trembling man with the pipe who looked like he might faint. Karen Odom stepped forward. She reached up and unsealed her helmet. The locks clicked open, and she pulled it off, revealing her face. She was a woman in her early 30s with brown skin, warm brown eyes, and the kind of face that made people feel safe without knowing why. She looked at the crowd of frightened Velhari, and then she looked down at a small child who had separated from the group and was standing alone in the middle of the bay, shaking so hard its skin was flickering through every color like a broken light. Odom crouched down slowly. She set her helmet on the floor. She held out her empty hands, palms up, and she smiled. "Hey there, little one," she said softly. "It is okay. You are safe now. We are here to help." The child did not understand the words. No translator was running between them. But it understood her voice. It understood her hands. It understood that this large, strange creature had made itself small and was offering something that felt like kindness. The child took one step forward, then another. Then it reached out with one thin hand and touched Odom's open palm. Its skin stopped flickering and settled into a soft, pale gold. The cargo bay went quiet. Captain Yelena pushed through the crowd. She walked slowly toward the Marines, her forearms held at her sides, her skin shifting through shades of violet and blue as she tried to control her emotions. She stopped in front of Vasquez, who had also removed her helmet, revealing a young woman with dark hair and sharp, watchful eyes. Yelena activated her personal translator. "Who are you?" she asked. "What species are you?" Vasquez looked back toward the corridor. Greer was walking in now, his own helmet off, his rifle hanging at his side. He was the last to enter, and he moved with no rush at all, as if he had all the time in the world. "We are humans," he said simply. "From Earth. We picked up your distress signal and came to help." Yelena stared at him. She knew that name. Every spacefaring species in the galaxy knew that name, though most of them only from warning files and horror stories. "Earth," she repeated, and her skin went very, very dark. "Earth is a Category 12 death world. Your planet is one of the most dangerous environments in the known galaxy. Nothing from that world should be capable of building ships or forming language or—" She stopped herself. She looked at the child, still holding Karen Odom's hand. She looked at the broken Krethari gunship, drifting in pieces outside her viewport. "You destroyed that ship in seconds," she said quietly. Greer nodded. "Yes. And the others ran from you." "Yes." Yelena was silent for a long time. Then she said, "We called for help, and a death world answered." Greer almost smiled. "That is about right." Yelena looked at her crew still pressed against the wall, still staring at the humans with wide, frightened eyes. Then she looked back at Greer. "Are we in danger from you?" "No," Greer said, and the way he said it, with a quiet certainty that left no room for doubt, made Yelena believe him completely. "Then welcome aboard the Gentle Passage, Captain Greer," she said, "and thank you for coming." Greer nodded. Then he turned to his team. "All right, let us get to work. Holt, go find their engineering section and start patching holes. Odom, set up a medical station and check everyone for injuries. Vasquez, secure the airlocks and make sure we do not get any more surprises." The Marines moved, and for the first time in hours, the Velhari began to breathe again. The hours that followed were strange for everyone. The Velhari had spent their whole lives around other species in the Galactic Union, beings that were more or less similar to themselves. Light bones, thin bodies, soft voices. The galaxy, as most species understood it, was a place of careful movements and quiet conversations, where the loudest sound in a room was usually someone disagreeing politely about a trade agreement. Humans were not like that. Danny Holt was the first to make this clear. He had gone to the engineering section with 2 Velhari engineers to help patch the hull breaches. The biggest problem was a support beam that had fallen across a critical doorway, blocking access to the emergency sealant storage. The beam was made of a dense alloy and weighed roughly 180 kilograms. The 2 Velhari engineers had been trying to move it for hours, pushing and pulling and rigging up a makeshift lever system that had failed 3 times. Holt walked up to the beam, looked at it, bent down, and picked it up. He did not strain. He did not grunt. He simply wrapped his hands around it, straightened his back, and lifted it off the ground as if it were a piece of furniture that needed to be moved to the other side of the room. He carried it 6 steps to the left and set it down against the wall. Then he turned around and saw both Velhari engineers staring at him with their skin flashing bright yellow, which he would later learn meant extreme shock. "What?" he said. One of the engineers, a male named Dren, asked through his translator, "How much do you weigh?" "About 90 kilos, Holt said. "Why?" Dren looked at his colleague. Neither of them said anything for a very long time. The words spread through the ship quickly. The humans were strong. Not just strong compared to the Velhari, but strong in a way that did not make biological sense to anyone who had studied the galaxy's known species. Their muscles were layered in thick bundles. Their bones were dense and solid, not hollow. Their skin was tough. When Odom rolled up her sleeve to clean a scratch she had gotten during the boarding, a nearby Velhari noticed the scar tissue on her forearm from an old injury and asked what had happened. "Broke my arm when I was 12. Odom said casually. "Fell out of a tree." "And it healed?" the Velhari asked, amazed. "Of course it healed. Took about 6 weeks." The Velhari looked at her as if she had said something impossible. Among their species, A broken bone was a life-threatening injury that required months of medical care and often never fully recovered. The idea that a child could break a bone and simply wait for it to grow back together was deeply unsettling. Elena, meanwhile, had pulled up Earth's entry in the Galactic Union Species database. The file was long and detailed, and clearly written by someone who was afraid. She read it in her quarters, while Greer sat across from her, eating a ration bar and waiting patiently for her to finish. The file described Earth as a Category 12 death world, the highest danger rating in the Union's classification system. The planet had extreme temperature variations, with some regions dropping below -50 degrees and others rising above 50. It had active tectonic plates that caused earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. It had massive storms that could flatten entire regions. Its oceans were deep and filled with predators. Its land was covered in competing life forms that had been killing each other for billions of years in an endless, brutal contest for survival. And in the middle of all of that, somehow, humans had evolved. The file noted that humans were persistence predators, a hunting strategy so rare in the galaxy that most species had never encountered it. Humans did not chase their prey with speed. They did not ambush. They simply followed. They walked after their prey for hours, sometimes days, never stopping, never resting, until the animal they were chasing collapsed from exhaustion and heat. Then they killed it. Elena read this section 3 times. Then she looked up at Greer, who was chewing his ration bar and looking perfectly relaxed. "Your species hunted by following things until they died," she said. "That is one way to put it," Greer said. "And you did this on a planet that was actively trying to kill you." "The planet was not trying to kill us specifically. It was just being a planet. We figured out how to deal with it." "You figured out how to deal with a Category 12 death world." "We did not know it was a Category 12 at the time. We just called it home." Elena set down her tablet. Her skin was a deep, troubled shade of violet. She liked this human. He was calm, he was polite, and his medic had held a frightened child's hand with a gentleness that Elena would not have expected from a species that hunted by exhaustion. But she could also see the truth that the database was trying to communicate. Humans were built for a world that would have killed every other sapient species in the galaxy. They were survivors on a level that was hard to even understand. She told Greer about the Crithari. She told him everything, the raids that had been happening for 2 cycles, the hundreds of Velhari taken from their ships and sold as slaves, the Galactic Union's refusal to act because the Crithari held a seat on the Security Council and had powerful allies, the formal protests and the sanctions that were discussed but never applied, the letters and meetings that achieved nothing while her people disappeared. Greer listened without interrupting. He sat still, his ration bar forgotten in his hand, his eyes focused on Yelena with a steady attention that she found both comforting and slightly frightening. When she finished, the cargo bay was quiet except for the hum of the emergency power systems. "How many?" Greer asked. "How many of your people have they taken?" "Over 800 in the last cycle alone," Elena said. Her skin went almost black. "We do not know the exact number. Some ships simply vanished. We have no way to count the ones we never found." Greer set down his ration bar. He looked at the floor for a long time. Elena watched his face and saw something change in it, a shift that was small, but unmistakable. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed just slightly, his breathing slowed. She would later learn that this was what humans looked like when they became angry, not the loud, explosive anger that some species displayed. This was a quiet anger, the kind that sat down deep in the chest and did not go away, the kind that made decisions. "I need to make a call," Greer said. He stood up and walked to the communications room that Holt had managed to get partially working. He patched through to the Iron Meridian on a secure channel. Admiral Blackwood answered within 30 seconds. The conversation was short. Greer laid out the situation in plain language. A systematic slave trade, targeting a defenseless species. Hundreds of captives held in known locations. A galactic government that refused to act. He gave her the numbers. He gave her the coordinates that Yelena had provided for suspected Crethari holding facilities. There was a pause on the line. Greer could hear Blackwood breathing. "Hold your position, Captain," she said. "Keep those people safe. I am sending the 7th Fleet." The line went dead. Greer walked back to the cargo bay. Yelena was waiting for him, her skin still dark with grief. "Help is coming," he said. "More of you?" she asked. "A lot more of us." Yelena looked at him. She thought about the database file. She thought about the Crethari gunship that had been torn apart in seconds. She thought about persistent predators who'd chased their prey until it collapsed. And for the first time since the attack, she felt something she had not expected to feel. She felt sorry for the Crethari. The 7th Fleet arrived 41 hours later, and it arrived all at once. The Velhari crew had spent those hours being cared for in ways they had not expected. Karen Odom had set up a medical station in one corner of the cargo bay, using supplies from the Fiddler's Green. She had checked every single member of the crew, all 43 of them, treating cuts and bruises and one badly fractured arm with a calm, steady manner that made even the most frightened Velhari sit still for her. She learned their names. She asked about their families. When a young Velhari male told her he was worried about his mother back on their homeworld, Odom sat with him for 10 minutes and talked to him about her own children, using the translator, until his skin stopped flickering and settled into something close to calm. Danny Holt had become something of a strange celebrity among the engineering crew. He worked alongside the Velhari engineers for hours, patching hull breaches and rerouting power systems. And he talked the entire time. He told jokes that did not translate. He hummed songs that no one recognized. He once accidentally walked into a low doorway and hit his head so hard that the sound echoed through the corridor. And instead of falling down or crying out, he laughed and kept walking. The Velhari engineers watched him with a mixture of fascination and disbelief, as if they were observing a creature from a nature documentary about a world they would never visit. Priya Vasquez spent most of her time at the airlocks, standing guard with her rifle and her sharp eyes. She said very little, but the Velhari who passed by her noticed that she always nodded to them, a small, quick movement of her head that they eventually understood was a greeting. A few of the braver Velhari children began to approach her, curious about the tall, quiet human with the dark hair and the weapon that was almost as big as they were. Vasquez let them look. She even showed one of them how her helmet visor worked, flipping it up and down while the child watched in amazement. Then the 7th Fleet arrived, and everything changed. 14 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a staggered formation that covered an area of space larger than most Velhari cities. The Iron Meridian came first, a carrier so massive that it blocked the light of the nearest star when viewed from the Gentle Passage's windows. It was followed by 6 destroyers, 4 frigates, and 2 troop transports, each one taking its position in the formation with a smooth, practiced precision that spoke of thousands of hours of training and hundreds of years of military tradition. The Velhari crew gathered at every viewport they could find and stared. Torev, standing at the command deck window, counted the ships 3 times because he could not believe the number. His skin was cycling through colors so fast that he looked like a broken display screen. "Captain," he said to Alina, "that is a war fleet. That is a full war fleet. For us?" Elena did not answer. She was staring at the Iron Meridian and trying to understand what she was seeing. The ship was enormous, yes, but it was not just the size that struck her. It was the way it moved, heavy and deliberate, like a large animal that knows nothing in the area can threaten it. It moved like it was not afraid of anything. Admiral Connie Blackwood came aboard the Gentle Passage 2 hours later. She arrived on a small shuttle with a 4-person escort, and when she stepped through the airlock, the Velhari who saw her were confused. After everything they had seen of humans, after the Marines in their heavy armor and the fleet that filled their sky, they expected the leader to be the biggest and most frightening of them all. Instead, Blackwood was shorter than most of her own soldiers. She was a compact woman in her 50s, with close-cut gray hair and a plain uniform that carried no decoration except the rank insignia on her collar. She wore no armor. She carried no weapon that anyone could see. She walked with small, precise steps, and her face showed nothing at all. But Greer and his Marines snapped to attention when she entered the room. Their backs went straight. Their eyes went forward. They did not move until she told them to stand easy. And the Velhari, watching this, understood something important. The most dangerous person in this fleet was not the biggest or the loudest. It was this small, quiet woman who made warriors freeze with a look. Blackwood met with Elena in what had once been the ship's meeting room, now half-collapsed and propped up with emergency supports. She sat down across from the Velhari captain and spoke through the translator in a voice that was polite but did not waste time. She told Elena that the United Earth Navy had spent the last 41 hours gathering information. They had used their own sensor networks and intelligence sources to locate 3 Krathari holding facilities where captured Velhari were believed to be kept. She told Elena that Earth was not a member of the Galactic Union, and did not recognize the Krathari's political protections or the Union's authority over human military operations. She told Yelena that under Earth's laws, piracy and slavery were crimes that did not have borders. Then she said, "We are going to get your people back." Yelena's skin flickered. "Admiral, the Krathari Dominion is a military power. They have hundreds of warships. They have allies on the Union Security Council. If you attack them, you will be starting a conflict that could spread across this entire region of space." "I am aware of that," Blackwood said. "And you are still going to do this. Captain Yelena, 800 of your people are in cages right now. Some of them have been there for over a year. Every hour we spend talking about politics is an hour they spend in chains. So yes, I am still going to do this." The operation was called Bright Morning. It was planned in 6 hours and launched in 12, which was fast even by human standards. The plan was simple in concept and violent in execution. Hit all 3 holding facilities at the same time, overwhelm the defenses before the Krathari could organize a response, and get the captives out alive. The first target was a barren moon called Vreth 4. It had an underground prison complex defended by 600 Krathari soldiers, and an orbital defense platform bristling with weapons. The platform was designed to hold off a fleet for days. It lasted 9 minutes against the Iron Meridian's main batteries. The human carrier sat at the edge of weapons range and fired a sustained barrage of kinetic rounds that punched through the platform's shields, tore through its armor, and broke it into 3 pieces that spun slowly apart in the silence of space. Then the troop transports moved in. 3 companies of United Earth Marines dropped onto Vreth 4's surface in armored landing craft. They hit the ground hard and fast, breaching the facility's outer walls with explosive charges and pouring into the corridors in tight formations. The Krathari garrison fought back. They were soldiers, trained and armed, and they defended their position with everything they had. It was not enough. The Marines moved through the underground complex like water through a broken pipe, flowing around obstacles, filling every gap, pushing forward without stopping. Greer's fireteam Direwolf was in the lead. Vasquez went first through every door, reading the space ahead with the instinct of someone who had done this 100 times before. Holt placed his breaching charges with quick, precise movements, blowing open locked doors and sealed bulkheads as if they were made of paper. 4 hours after the first Marine boot hit the ground, the garrison surrendered. The ones who fought were put down. The ones who dropped their weapons were disarmed and placed under guard. Blackwood's orders had been clear. Minimize unnecessary killing. The Marines followed those orders, but they did not hesitate when hesitation would have cost lives. Holt blew the lock on the main detention wing. The heavy door swung open, and Vasquez stepped through first. She found 214 Valhari inside. They were thin, they were hurt, they were packed into cells that were too small and too cold, lying on bare metal floors without blankets or bedding. Some of them had injuries that had never been treated. Some of them were so malnourished that their translucent skin had turned gray, a color that Valhari only showed when their bodies were shutting down. They looked up at Vasquez with wide, empty eyes. They had been in those cells for months. They had stopped expecting rescue a long time ago. Vasquez stood in the doorway. She looked at them. She felt something hot and tight in her chest that she did not have time to name. Then she knelt down, just as Odom had done on the gentle passage. She placed her rifle on the floor. She held out her empty hands. "You are free," she said. "We are taking you home." One Valhari, an older female with cracked skin and hands that shook, stood up slowly. She walked toward Vasquez with small, uncertain steps, as if she had forgotten how to move without being told. She reached out and touched the Marine's outstretched hand. Her skin turned gold. Behind Vasquez, Karen Odom was already moving, her medical kit open, her hands ready. She had work to do. Across the other two facilities, the story was the same. The Marines hit fast, hit hard, and freed every captive they found. By the time bright morning was over, 673 Valhari had been pulled out of Crithari prisons and brought aboard human ships, where they were fed, treated, and given warm blankets that most of them refused to let go of. 17 Marines were wounded during the operation. None were killed. The Crithari Dominion had just learned something that the rest of the galaxy was about to find out. Humans did not wait for permission to do what they believed was right, and once they started, they did not stop until the job was done. The Galactic Union Assembly Hall was the largest enclosed space ever built by any known species. It was a vast dome of pale stone and living crystal, designed to hold representatives from hundreds of worlds. Sound carried perfectly inside it, which meant that when Ambassador Grace Keller of Earth walked to the speaker's platform, every single delegate heard the click of her boots on the polished floor. Keller was tall, with gray eyes and dark hair streaked with silver. She was 51 years old and had spent 20 years in diplomatic service, first for the United States, then for the unified Earth government. She had a habit of pausing before she answered a question, just long enough to make the room go quiet, and she used that habit now. She stepped up to the platform, looked out at the assembled delegates of 47 species, and said nothing for 5 full seconds. The assembly was already in chaos before she arrived. The Crithari delegation had demanded an emergency session the moment news of Operation Bright Morning reached them. Their ambassador, a broad, armored figure named Gorath, had spent the last hour shouting about violations of sovereignty, acts of war, and the destruction of legitimate Crithari defense installations. Several other delegations had joined in. The Miragi, who were allied with the Crithari, called for sanctions against Earth. The Orshan, who were neutral, called for calm. The Telvanni, who were afraid of everyone, called for a recess. Then Keller spoke. "Thank you for allowing me to address the assembly," she said. Her voice was even and clear and carried no emotion that anyone could use against her. "I will be brief, because the facts of this matter are simple." She explained what had happened. A Valhari ship had sent a distress call. Earth had answered. Earth had found a ship under attack by pirates. Earth had driven off the pirates and rescued the crew. During conversations with the Valhari survivors, Earth had learned of a large-scale slave trade operation targeting Velhari civilians. Earth had located 3 facilities where captives were being held. Earth had freed those captives. 673 people, Keller said, men, women, and children of the Velhari species, held in underground prisons, underfed, untreated, sold as property. Some of them had been in captivity for over a year. She paused. The hall was silent. The Crethari delegation has accused Earth of violating their sovereignty. I want to address that directly. Earth is not a member of this union. We have not signed your treaties. We are not bound by your agreements. But, even if we were, I want to be very clear about something. There is no treaty in this galaxy, or any other, that gives any species the right to put another species in chains. Gorath, the Crethari ambassador, rose from his seat. His voice boomed across the chamber. You attacked our territory without provocation. You destroyed our defense platforms. You killed our soldiers. This is an act of war. Keller looked at him. She did not blink. Your soldiers were guarding slave pens. Your defense platforms were protecting a place where people were bought and sold. If defending those things is the hill you want to die on, Ambassador, that is your choice. But I would think carefully before you call what we did an act of war, because if this was war, you would know it. The chamber went very quiet. Keller turned back to the full assembly. Earth does not seek conflict with the Crethari Dominion, or with any member of this union. We are not here to impose our values on species that have their own histories and their own ways of doing things. We recognize the sovereignty of every world represented in this chamber. But we do not recognize the right of any species, anywhere, for any reason, to enslave another. This is not a political position. This is not a negotiating point. This is a line, and it does not move. She took a breath. What she said next would be translated into more than 600 languages, broadcast across thousands of worlds, and studied by military analysts, diplomats, and historians for generations. Let me tell you something about my species. We come from a place your scientists call a Category 12 death world. We know this. We grew up on a planet that tried to kill us every single day, with its storms, its predators, its diseases, its earthquakes, its ice ages. We fought the planet, and we survived. Then we fought each other for thousands of years before we learned how to stop. We are not proud of every part of our history. But that history made us what we are. We are hard to kill. We do not give up, and we do not leave people behind. She looked slowly around the chamber, making eye contact with every delegation she could see. So let me say this clearly, for the record, so there is no misunderstanding. If anyone in this chamber, any government, any corporation, any individual, is currently holding captives from any species, from any world, for any reason, I would strongly encourage you to let them go. Because if we hear about it, we are coming. We will not ask permission. We will not wait for a vote. We will not file a protest and hope for the best. We will come, and we will not stop until every single person is free. She stepped back from the platform. The hall was silent. Not the silence of agreement, and not the silence of shock. It was the silence of a room full of people, realizing that something had changed in the galaxy, and that it could not be changed back. Then the Velhari delegation stood up. There were 9 of them, small and thin and fragile-looking in a room full of larger species. They stood together in a single row, and their skin began to glow. It started as a faint shimmer, and then it grew, brightening until every Velhari delegate was lit from within by a steady warm gold. It was the strongest expression of gratitude their species could show. A full-body display that was impossible to fake and impossible to misunderstand. Every species in the room recognized it. One by one, other delegations began to stand. The Fenori, a small mammalian species that had lost colonies to Crethari raids decades ago. The Pelani, an aquatic people whose trade ships had been targeted in the same region of space. The Tan, who were large and powerful, but had chosen not to act alone against the Krithari for political reasons, and who now felt the shame of that decision settling on them like dust. They did not all glow gold. They did not all agree with everything Keller had said, but they stood. The Krithari delegation did not stand. Gorath sat in his chair with his armored arms folded across his chest, his face unreadable. He said nothing more for the rest of the session. Far from the assembly hall, aboard the gentle passage, which was being towed slowly toward the nearest Velhari repair station by a human frigate, Captain Lucas Greer sat alone in the cargo bay. The bay was empty now, except for some crates and the lingering smell of emergency sealant. He was eating a ration bar and reading a book on his battered tablet, a Western novel he had been trying to finish for 3 months. Captain Yelena found him there. She walked in quietly, her skin a calm, steady blue that meant peace. She sat down beside him on an overturned crate. For a moment, neither of them said anything. "Captain Greer," she said finally, "I have been thinking about something since the day you arrived. When you received our signal, you did not know who we were. You did not know if it was real. You did not know if it was a trap. But you came anyway. I want to understand why." Greer chewed his ration bar slowly. He thought about the question the way he thought about most things, carefully and without hurry. "Someone was asking for help," he said. "We had a ship and a crew. That was pretty much the whole decision. It cannot be that simple." "It really is." Yelena studied his face. She had spent weeks now around humans, and she was beginning to read their expressions the way she read the skin colors of her own kind. Greer was not lying. He was not being modest. He meant exactly what he said. "Your species frightens a great deal of the galaxy," she said. "I know," he said. "They think you are dangerous. We are dangerous. But you are not what they think." Greer looked at her. He had a small, tired smile on his face, the kind of smile that came from someone who had seen a lot of bad things and still chose to keep going. "No," he said. "We are exactly what they think we are. We are just also this." He held out the other half of his ration bar. Yelena took it. She bit into it and immediately regretted it. The taste was somewhere between stale bread and old boots. She chewed it anyway and swallowed. "That is terrible," she said. "I know," Greer said. "We have been trying to fix military food for about 400 years. It never gets better." Yelena made a sound that the translator could not process. Greer looked at her. "Was that a laugh?" he asked. "I think so," she said. "I have not done that in a long time." They sat together in the cargo bay as the stars moved slowly past the viewport. The crippled Velhari ship limping home under the protection of human warships. Two species that had never met before, sharing bad food and something that felt like the beginning of a friendship. And somewhere across the galaxy, in intelligence offices and military headquarters and government buildings on 100 different worlds, analysts were quietly updating their files on the species called human. The new note, added to every file in every language, said the same thing. "Do not engage. Do not provoke. Do not enslave anyone within range of their sensors. They will come, they will not stop, and they will not be alone." The Velhari cargo ship, Gentle Passage, was dying. It floated in the cold black emptiness of deep space, broken and leaking air from 3 large holes in its side. The ship had been hit hard and fast by Krithari pirate gunships, and now it could barely hold itself together. Emergency lights blinked red across every corridor. The walls groaned as the metal bent and twisted under pressure it was never built to handle. Captain Yelena stood in the middle of the command deck, her 4 thin arms gripping the railing to keep herself steady. She was a Velhari, a species that had evolved on a small, low-gravity moon far from any dangerous world. Her body was light, Her bones were hollow like a bird's, and her pale blue skin was almost see-through. She was built for gentle places, not for this, not for violence. Around her, the crew moved in a slow panic. Some were crying. Others were frozen at their stations, staring at screens full of damage reports they could not fix. The ship had no weapons. The Valhari had never needed weapons. They were traders and diplomats, known across the galaxy for their calm nature and their skill at making deals. Fighting was something other species did. But the Crithari did not care about that. 3 of their gunships circled the gentle passage like hungry animals waiting for a meal to stop moving. They were not in a hurry. They had jammed the escape pods. They had cut the main engines. Now they were slowly cutting through the airlocks, one by one, working their way inside. Eilina knew what they wanted. The Crithari did not care about the cargo. They wanted the crew. Valhari slaves were valuable on the black market because of their small size, their many hands, and their habit of obeying orders without fighting back. Hundreds of Valhari had disappeared in the last year alone, taken from ships just like this one, and the Galactic Union had done nothing about it, except send letters of protest that the Crithari threw away without reading. Yelena looked at her communications officer, a young male named Torev, whose skin was flickering white with fear. "Send a distress signal," she said. "Every frequency, every channel. Send it to everyone." Torev did as he was told. His hands shook as he entered the commands, but the signal went out, a wideband cry for help that flew in every direction at the speed of light. It was aimed at no one in particular. It was aimed at anyone who might hear it. Yelena gathered her crew of 43 in the central cargo bay, the largest open space on the ship. She told them to sit down and stay together. She believed this because she had to believe it, because the alternative was too terrible to say out loud. She did not know that her signal had reached a place no Valhari had ever contacted before. 6 light hours away, on a frozen moon called Titan that orbited a gas giant in an unremarkable solar system, a human listening post picked up the signal. The post was small, staffed by a rotating crew of 12, and its job was simple: sit in the dark and listen to everything. Lieutenant Nate Calloway was on duty when the signal came in. He was 26 years old, tall and thin, with messy brown hair and a face that always looked like he had just woken up from a nap. He had joined the United Earths Navy because his father had served, and his grandfather before that, and because growing up on a cattle ranch in Montana had given him a restless feeling that only went away when he was doing something that mattered. The signal hit his screen as a block of garbled noise. He ran it through the translation software twice. The first pass gave him fragments: damage, hostile, help, please. The second pass gave him coordinates and a rough picture of the situation. A ship was under attack. Pirates. Crew in danger. Calloway sent the report up the chain without hesitation. It moved fast, from Titan Station to Lunar Command to the Deep Space Communication Relay, and within 1 hour it was sitting on the desk of Admiral Connie Blackwood aboard the UEN carrier Iron Meridian. Blackwood read the report in her office, a plain gray room with no decorations except a photograph of her 2 grown sons taped to the wall. She was 53 years old, short, with sharp dark eyes and gray hair cut close to her head. She had earned her rank the hard way, through years of service that included the bloody mess of the Martian insurrection, where she had lost friends and gained a reputation for making hard decisions without blinking. Then she read it again. Then she picked up her communicator and called the destroyer Fiddler's Green, which was currently the closest combat vessel to the distress coordinates. The Fiddler's Green was a fast, tough ship built for exactly this kind of situation. Its crew was experienced, its weapons were loaded, and its Marine strike team was one of the best in the fleet. That team was called Fire Team Direwolf, and it was led by Captain Lucas Greer. Greer was 34, broad across the shoulders, with a square jaw and hands that looked like they had been used for hard work long before they had ever held a rifle. He had grown up on a farm outside Savannah, Georgia, where his mother had raised him and his 3 sisters alone, after his father died in a construction accident. He spoke slowly, with a deep southern accent that made people underestimate him exactly once. Sergeant Priya Vasquez was his point woman, a fast-moving close-quarters fighter from San Antonio who had a gift for reading a room before she entered it. Corporal Danny Holt was the demolitions expert, a skinny redhead from Ohio who could not stop talking and could not stop smiling, even when things were bad. And medic specialist Karen Odom was the team's heart, a calm and steady woman from North Carolina who had 3 kids back on Earth and treated every wounded person she met like they were a 4th. Greer got the call from Blackwood while his team was eating dinner in the mess hall. He listened, asked 2 questions, and stood up. "We have a job," he said. Nobody asked what kind. They just got up and moved. Within 20 minutes, the Fiddler's Green had changed course and punched into faster-than-light travel. The ship hummed with energy as it tore through the fabric of normal space, bending the rules of physics the way only human ships could. Estimated arrival time, 11 hours. Somewhere behind them, the distress signal from the gentle passage kept repeating, a quiet, desperate voice calling out into the dark. And somewhere ahead of them, 43 Velhari sat huddled in a cargo bay, listening to the sound of Krethari cutting tools getting closer, not knowing that the most dangerous species in the galaxy was already on its way. The Velhari had asked the universe for help. The universe, in its strange and terrible wisdom, had sent them humans.